Savannah in July smells like a man who put too much cologne on and then stood in a steam room to brag about it. Heat swelled off the pavement and climbed under my black suit like it was trying to live there. The funeral home's air conditioner was losing a fight with a roomful of cousins. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead, blades the color of sweet tea. My mother's photo, the one from Christmas 2 years ago when she'd worn her coral scarf and called it her tomato season, sat in a bronze frame near the casket. The frame reflected the soft gold of the lamps, so her smile looked lit from inside. Marissa stood with the family, technically. She'd chosen a pale dress that matched her idea of taste more than the weather, hair pinned in a low knot that made her look like a magazine spread about summer weddings. She placed a soft hand on my forearm when people came to murmur condolences and let it fall away the moment they left, like I was a piece of furniture she'd been obliged to lean on for the picture. I took my spot 2 rows behind the front because the front had filled without anyone looking for me. That should have hurt more than it did. Grief is a scalpel. It makes your world narrow and true. Minor slights can't compete when the person who taught you to tie your shoes is lying 10 feet away and you can't fix how still she is. My name is Ethan Cole. I repair what the city forgets is alive, signals, grids, the bones of things that hum. If you want to know what that looks like, imagine a tangle of copper and code under the sidewalks and inside the walls, complaining like old men when summer hits 98. My job is to make their complaints sound like music again. Mom used to say I was the only person she knew who could coax a tantrum into a lullaby. We buried her under a live oak that had seen things and wasn't impressed by any of them. The pastor spoke of comfort. The cicadas spoke of everything else. After the last shovel of sandy earth fell thick and final, we drove to the church hall on Whitaker where women who had known my mother since she was Helen with the ponytail carried in casseroles like proof that love can be layered and reheated. That's where Marissa chose to be honest. "Let's not drag it out," she said quietly, slicing a square of something that involved mayonnaise and patience. "We both know this has been over. You have your world, I have mine." She could have waited a week to say that. She could have waited an hour. But grief rearranges what you think is possible, and she saw a doorway where I saw a wall. Her eyes were kind because she decided they were. She set a manila folder on the table between the tea and a tray of deviled eggs. The tab on the folder said, "Meg Chisholm, mediator," in tidy print. "I'm too tired to perform," I said. "If you want to end our marriage, you won't need to make a show to do it." Her mouth softened in relief. Not love, relief, as if a speech she'd rehearsed had landed and we could move on to the next scene. The executor read the will 2 days later in a downtown office, cooled to the point of teeth chatter, windows looking out at trees in Forsyth Park, making their slow green arguments against August. I expected simple arithmetic, house to me, because I'm the child, modest savings split according to manners. What I got was law, that knew people. The base estate, such as it was, came to me. The additional account, what my mother called her care cushion, was conditional. Marissa had served as her primary helper the last 6 months because my hours were stupid and hospitals were a maze. If Marissa's documented caregiving met the standard listed in a 2-page appendix written in my mother's fussy script, she would inherit that cushion outright. If it did not, if there was evidence of neglect, falsified logs, or abandonment, the cushion would automatically transfer to a nursing scholarship fund my mother had named in pencil a year ago and told no one about but her attorney. The executor, a man with a tie too tight for the heat, handed me the appendix like he was passing me a live bird. "I'm proud of how much you helped," Marissa told me later, the way someone congratulates a child for having shared. Her confidence had edges. "Helen and I did everything by the book. I kept records, coordinated hospice, you know that." "I know what you told me," I said, because my mother taught me the difference between knowing and being told. That evening, after the casseroles had been eaten and the texts from neighbors had shrunk to a manageable ache, I went to my mother's house on Hall Street. The porch still held the chair where she'd watched thunderstorms roll across the sky, counting the miles by seconds between flash and clap. Her home smelled like eucalyptus and lemon oil, and a life that didn't include hospital air. I unlocked the door with the spare key she'd hidden in the third brick from the left since 1989 and walked into a quiet that felt like a church. The same quiet that had made me a listener before I was a talker, the same quiet that had taught me that silence is also evidence. In her pantry, behind the tins of peaches and a jar of flour older than my career, I found what she'd left me. The envelope said, "Open after the funeral," because she believed in good instructions. Inside, a list of passwords for the house automation hub, the thermostat account, the doorbell camera, the pill dispenser. Below the list, in her sharp, neat hand, "Don't seek revenge." Document. Truth is not a knife, it's a scale. That's how a grief story became an audit. You'd be surprised what a house will tell you if you speak its languages. The thermostat reports temperatures and set points to the minute. The door sensors snitch on every entry and exit. The motion detectors my mother insisted on installing after she fell in February log what moved and when. The pill dispenser texts the hub like a chatty neighbor. Dose delivered, lid opened, lid not opened, reminder sounded. It's all there if you know where there is, and keep a calm heart while you look. I pulled reports for the dates Marissa had claimed as her shifts. A pattern emerged that looked like bad music. On those days, the thermostat hovered at 86 because "Mama runs cold" was a story Marissa liked to tell. The motion stayed flat for hours in the middle of the day. The pill dispenser pushed reminders long past the time the hospice plan allowed. The doorbell camera, blessed petty hardware that it is, showed Amazon drivers, my aunt dropping off a chicken pie, and exactly 0 entries with Marissa's face between noon and 4 on the Wednesday she'd called bath day in her log. I didn't stop at heat and hinges. I asked a friend in IT how to retrieve an iPhone's significant locations if you have the passcode and a dead woman's grudging consent. My mother had written the code in the envelope because she was the kind of person who kept quarters in her car for meters and organized her pantry like a color wheel. The map told a calmer story than mine. On 3 afternoons, Marissa had listed as hospice coordination, the phone's location. Hers landed for 90 minutes at a rooftop bar I had once taken her to for anniversary drinks. Cocktail hour, not bath day. I talked to the hospice case coordinator, a woman named Pamela who had a voice like a good porch, shade, and welcome. We spoke on the record with her permission because Georgia law makes room for people to save themselves from forgetting what was said, and because I had learned too much to trust my memory when my heart was full. On the audio, you can hear the hum of her home air conditioner doing what ours couldn't at the funeral. You can hear Pam shuffle papers. You can hear me breathe in the edges. "What I can tell you," Pam said carefully, "is that we had several reschedules from Marissa, and we had to chase down a couple of wound care checklists that came in late and identical. We don't accuse families of falsifying unless we know. We assumed busy." "Her logs say she was there," I said. "She may have been," Pam said, compassion making room for accuracy. "But the bell on your mother's pillbox doesn't share that memory." I hung up and cried, not because of the shape of the case I was building, but because my mother had needed more than she got, and I had been in basements coaxing light back into old buildings when I should have been here in a back bedroom, coaxing air back into the woman who taught me that kindness can be a verb. In her desk drawer, under a stack of bank statements and the letter from her cousin in Macon that always started with, "You won't believe what they did at church today," I found a folder labeled "Plan for Ethan" in blue ink. Inside were notes written as if I were a student, and this was a lab. "If Marissa cares as she says, she'll welcome your audit. Don't argue. Align. If she lies, don't hate her. Set boundaries. People under pressure tell stories to survive. You don't have to be inside the story to be kind." It felt like my mother had crawled inside my head and left instructions for the version of me who was too angry to be smart. When I asked Marissa to meet, she chose a cafe with cold brew strong enough to erase a personality and music loud enough to excuse a silence. She arrived with a bouquet from a vendor I knew she used for her wedding work. She never brought flowers for my mother when it was just us and Tuesdays. "I was good to your mom," she opened, a line delivered as fact, not up for debate. "You were not as good as you should have been," I said gently, "because accuracy is not cruelty." She laughed too quickly. "You're talking to thermostats now? Is this how you grieve? With spreadsheets?" "Yes," I said, "because my grief prefers numbers when people are slippery." I slid a printout of the thermostat's log across the table, then the doorbell stills, the pill dispenser timeline, her texts about running late, can someone else pop in a thread she had accidentally included me on in March. Under those, the significant locations map with 3 hearts she had added for the rooftop bar. Her mouth made a small O and then flattened, that thin smile she used when a bride's mother wanted peonies in August. "You're reading this wrong," she said. "I checked in by phone sometimes. Your mother hated worry. I made sure she felt loved." "Feeling loved is not the same as being cared for," I said. "When love leaves, the obligation not to lie remains." "That's cute," she said, and for a second I saw her with the mask off. "You think this will get you more money." I don't want your inheritance, I said. I want my mother's will respected. Her clause isn't a trap, it's a promise. Her eyes went wet in the way people's eyes go wet when they think water will move the furniture. Ethan, she said, reaching for my hand, we were already broken and you know it. I was drowning. I did my best. I had weddings booked, deposits paid. What did you want me to do? Cancel brides because your mom needed to be spoon-fed? Yes, I said, that's what care is. Sometimes it costs you. She withdrew her hand and set her jaw at a familiar angle. You'll destroy us both because you love being right. I'll keep going because my mother left me a map, I said. There's a difference. I compiled the packet like I build a field report for an outage that could cost $250,000 if mishandled. Each section had a plain language summary, relevant logs, and an appendix for anyone who didn't trust anything that didn't come with a timestamp. I asked the executor to recommend mediation rather than court. He did, probably because I arrived with facts, not fireworks. In the week before the session, Marissa tried tenderness on like a dress she used to fit. She sent me a photo of a shrimp po' boy from the drive-through spot at Thunderbolt we used to hit when money was bad and heat was worse. She dropped a playlist into my messages titled Us, Once. She left peonies at my door even though she knew they'd make me think of a bride in late May who cried because the florist lied about what the soil could give. I didn't reply to any of it. Silence isn't revenge. It's a tool you use when every word you could say would be a fight you don't need to win. The day of the mediation, Savannah gave us a thunderstorm like a sermon. The office sat near the river where cargo cranes moved slower than prayer. The mediator was a woman named Charlene with reading glasses on a chain and a voice that sounded practiced at keeping rooms calm. The executor took a seat like a man who'd memorized where the exits were. Pam from hospice arrived because the clause allowed first-hand testimony and because she'd decided, I think, that my mother deserved at least one person in the room who knew how to say wound care without flinching. Marissa came in 5 minutes late, a brand new scarf looped like a shield. Her attorney, one of those men who doesn't sweat because he has people to do that for him, sat and smiled like a dentist. We're here, Charlene began, to see if we can honor Ms. Cole's expressed wishes without breaking the people who remain. She looked at me when she said honor. She looked at Marissa when she said people. The balance felt deliberate. I kept it simple. I'm not asking for money from Marissa, I said. I'm asking that the conditional fund be treated according to the clause. If neglect or falsified care logs are shown, it goes to the scholarship. If not, it goes to her. My mother wrote that for a reason. Marissa's lawyer opened his folder with a flourish. Our position is that any deviation from perfect care was de minimis. The spouse served as primary caregiver as any reasonable person would expect. Any suggestion of falsification is absurd on its face. Pam cleared her throat gently. The room pivoted toward her like flowers following light. We had identical checklists come in 3 weeks in a row, she said. Same pen pressure, same missed initial. When we requested originals, we received scans. When we tried to make a same-day wound care visit after a telehealth flight concerns, we were told to come tomorrow after lunch. We also have a log of unanswered bell prompts from the med box on 2 of the days in question. Marissa's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. The rain knocked politely at the window like it wanted to attend. I slid the thermostat logs across the table, then the doorbell clips. I didn't dramatize. The facts had more theater than I'd ever seen because they weren't performing, just being. When the iPhone location map arrived at the top of the stack, Marissa lowered her eyes like a woman who has finally decided she's tired of looking at herself in mirrors that tell the truth. I went after, she whispered, as if that grammar could make a margin where none existed. After I finished work things, I always went. Sometimes, Pam said, not unkindly, after is too late. Charlene took a long breath. Ms. Cole's clause reads, she said, reading glasses dipping, that should her designated caregiver neglect agreed-upon duties or falsified documentation reasonably relied upon for her comfort and health, all custodial funds will, without shame or public spectacle, be redirected to the scholarship fund named here, and the executor shall ask her son to administer the residual estate with an eye toward kindness, not revenge. Ms. Cole was very specific. It's not about punishment. It's about the truth. Marissa's lawyer requested a recess. They huddled in the hallway for 14 minutes. When they returned, Marissa's face had the pale sheen of someone who has just discovered that consequences are not a rumor. She didn't apologize. I didn't ask her to. That would have been for me, and this was about my mother. What Marissa did say was small and true. I thought I could do everything, she said. I couldn't. Charlene wrote the agreement in careful script. The conditional fund would go to the scholarship, named the Helen Cole Nurse Scholarship for students at the community college who wanted to move from CNA to RN because my mother believed in laddered kindness. I would take over the house and the modest accounts. There would be no public statements, no win parades. In exchange, I would not pursue anything further. I signed. Marissa signed. The executor signed with a flourish that felt like a bow. As we stood, Charlene touched the envelope with her glasses and smiled the smallest smile. Your mother was a practical poet, she said. People like that leave the rest of us better tools. I walked out into a city washed quick clean by rain. The squares steamed like horses. I stood under the portico and watched a couple hurry under one umbrella, their bodies leaning toward each other in a geometry you can't fake. I wanted to be angry at all of it. I wanted a speech that would drain the hurt like a valve. Instead, relief moved through me, slow and heavy, a tide that didn't need my permission. Love had left a long time ago. The obligation not to lie had finally caught up. It would be neat to tell you that the scholarship made me feel saintly. It didn't. I started it because my mother asked me to and because the clause demanded a next step, not a victory lap. I met with the dean in a room with plastic chairs and a poster about hand hygiene. We designed an application that asked for the opposite of performance. Tell us when you stayed late to hold a hand, because the aide scheduled after you never came. Tell us when you made a list so your tired brain didn't forget a small thing that would become a big thing. That would become a big thing. We picked 3 students that first year. One wrote, "Thank you," on a card with sunflowers like a child drew them. I tacked it above my desk and didn't perform gratitude for the internet, which is the most radical thing anyone does anymore. Marissa moved out of our apartment on Victory Drive with the efficiency of a vendor strike. I took down our framed print of Tybee at sunset and put it in the hall closet like a wound I didn't need to look at to heal. When she came for the last box, she stood in the doorway and searched for a different ending. "You were waiting for me to fail," she said. "I was waiting for the truth to stop being treated like a party trick," I said. She nodded as if I'd confirmed a thing she wanted to believe. "You always loved the numbers more than you love me," she said, which was a prettier story than the plain one. I loved her until the numbers told me a truth she kept trying to decorate away. The executor mailed me a thin envelope with a thicker result, control of what remained. It came with a letter my mother had written in February, that same coral scarf in her memory even without the photograph. "Ethan," it said, "I've seen women like Marissa my whole life, capable and tired, kind until kindness costs them, determined to sell a pretty table center even when the table itself is rotten. Don't hate her, but don't let her turn my life into a brochure. Make something steady with what I leave behind." The house became steady, the way a chest becomes steady when a fever breaks. My evenings found new rituals. I oiled the porch swing. I replaced the doorbell camera even though it had already done its job. I taught a neighborhood kid to solder because his science teacher didn't know where to buy the right kit. The city hummed around me. The grid behaved because I started sleeping again. One morning, I carried a folding table into the community college auditorium for the scholarship announcement and set it at the back of the stage because I've never been comfortable in front. The 3 recipients shook my hand and thanked my mother in the present tense, which felt right and odd at once. A young woman named Alina with a bun so tight it looked like resolve spoke about the first time she changed a dressing alone and how her hands shook until the old man on the bed said, "Take your time." I've had worse. A man named Trevor cried when he said he could finally cut his hours at the gas station and still buy the books with color pictures that made everything look less like a code and more like a thing you could learn. I thought of my mother counting the seconds between lightning and thunder and felt a closeness I hadn't felt at her grave, because this hands and time and exactness was the weather she loved. Months slid past, and the story the city had made of us cooled to a rumor. Marissa's wedding business posted a reel of a bride under chandeliers and called it curated joy. Sometimes the pill dispenser would chirp in my memory, and I'd find myself stopped in a grocery aisle staring at adult diapers like a person whose past has weight and weirdness. Grief walks with you and tries on hats. Some fit, some don't. Pam mailed me a plant clipped from her yard with a card that said, "You are the kind of son nurses like." I put the plant on my mother's kitchen sill where the light hits and told it had one job, not to die. On a Wednesday that felt like a Tuesday wearing a disguise, I ran into Marissa on Broughton near the store that sells things no one needs. She looked tired in a way that had lost its gloss. We did that small, awkward dance people do when confronting the ruins of a home improvement project they both helped demolish. Stop, go, hands, no hands. I heard about the scholarship, she said. Helen would like it. Mom would have called it decent, I said, which is better than nice. She nodded. I'm seeing someone, she added, like the way you confess to a doctor you don't floss. He's good with my bad days. I hope your good days don't become negotiable, I said, and meant it. One of the curses of knowing the clocks in a house is that you can hear them in a person. We parted without promises. I walked toward the river where the air always smells faintly of iron and storms that haven't decided if they're coming. My phone buzzed with an email from the executor confirming the first scholarship disbursement had gone out. The subject line, "Your mother's clause, enacted." I stood on the lookout near the bridge and read it twice. The wind lifted the sweat off my shirt and for once didn't give it back. If you want a moral, I don't have one neat enough for a billboard. I have a couple sentences I wrote on a napkin in the diner my mother loved when she wanted pecan pie without judgment. Telling the truth is not the same as making a scene. Silence can be a refuge or a weapon. Learn which is which. And this, the one that keeps me honest. When love leaves, what remains is the obligation not to lie. The house sleeps now the way it didn't when my mother was sick. The thermostat sits politely at 76. The pill dispenser is in a box with her scarves and the recipe for her impossible coconut cake. The doorbell camera watches squirrels chew decisions into fence posts. The scholarship emails arrive like small bells. When I make coffee on a Sunday morning, the kitchen fills with a quiet I used to fear because I thought it meant I was alone. It doesn't. It means I built something that doesn't require noise to stand. And on some evenings, when the heat has the decency to loosen its grip, I sit on the porch and listen to thunder farther off than danger, and I count in seconds the distance between where I am and where the hurt lives now. The numbers get bigger. My mother would smile at that. Numbers were her way of trusting what you couldn't touch. They are mine too. They brought me here. They kept me from making a show and called me to make a promise. They gave a fund a name. They gave some nurses' hands a little more time. They put my marriage in the past tense without making me cruel. That's not vengeance. That's engineering. You don't punish the lights for going out. You fix the line and build a better ground. What do you think? Should moral neglect cost someone an inheritance? Would you have forgiven or gone all the way to the truth like I did? Tell me in the comments, and if stories like this keep you listening, hit like and subscribe. It matters more than you think.